The Arctic region is fragile and yet vitally important ecosystem, and one under pressure from the intensifying effects of climate change. What you may call the Arctic, I call home, and there the climate change is already shaping our futures. The Arctic warms 3 times as fast as the rest of the world, and for the last 25 years we lost an area of sea ice which equals the full continent of India. In parts of the Arctic, coastal erosion due to permafrost thaw wash out more than 17 meters of coastline every year, and Arctic oceans acidify 3 to 4 times as fast as other oceans, and this may have really devastating impacts on fisheries as well as national economies. However, the Arctic is closer to us than we may think, and the effects of climate change in the Arctic spill over to the rest of the world. The polar vortex has become less stable, and the frequency of extreme weather has increased dramatically, also in Southern Europe, in the US, and in Asia. The frozen part of the world contains enough water to rise sea levels by 60 meters, and under the high emission scenarios we now are facing, we will probably reach already 1 meter of sea level rise by 2070. The indigenous communities, biodiversity, and traditional ways of life in the region are under threat. And at the global level, swift climate action is needed, but at the local level, adaptation and to a changing climate is already underway. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rolf Røden. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program. And today we're going to explore how we are all coupled to the Arctic and how we jointly can work together to enhance mitigation and adaptation. And to do so, I have with me an excellent panel of speakers. I have with me Clauwers. He's a Belgian impact storyteller, advocate for ocean and the cryosphere. And for over a decade, he has captured the impacts of the rising global temperature and biodiversity loss, documenting the front lines of climate change throughout powerful visual storytelling. On his right side, I have Ishita Sharma, who's the Research and Development Manager at the Port of Esbjerg in Denmark. And on my further end, I do have Erkki Parkkonen, who is the mayor of Salla in Finland, and he has been there since 2015. He has a background with a master in laws and have had many central positions in regional development organizations and projects related to business in particular. So, Erkki, I would like to start up with you. Just to give us kind of a feeling of what's actually going on in the Arctic. So, from your perspective, how are the settlements and communities and indigenous peoples of the region dealing with a changing Arctic?
Thank you, Rolf, for the presentation. I live in Salla, and our municipality is located above the Arctic Circle. And we really see the effects of climate change already. Livelihoods, our traditional livelihood, reindeer herding, for example, it's got many difficulties of climate change. Because of winters comes later, average 2 weeks later than before, and maybe the more bigger problem is that the climate is changing during the winter more and more. There is plus degrees and next day minus degrees, and because of that there came ice layers to snow and more snow, and again ice layers, and reindeers cannot dig food during the winter time. And it happens also so that snow comes to molten soil, and it makes mold grow under the snow, spoiling the lichen and preventing reindeer from grazing in winter time. That's why the reindeer herders had to feed more and more reindeers during the winter, and it's difficult, and it's not normal, it's not our culture, and it's expensive. Then other livelihood is tourism, because tourism is very important in north, in our area, and winter tourism. And when the winter comes later, for example, you have to store snow for the next winter, and that's not wise, I think so. But it's you have to, if you want that you are sure that the next autumn, when the winter used to begin, that you can ski and do other winter sports, what our tourism area are doing. And of course, in our daily life, we go to forests and lakes and so on. And when there is no real winter, it's very dangerous and causes many problems to our local people, daily life and forestry, for example. This kind of effects. We still have real winters, but we are concerning about the future. What happens?
And I know coming from a nation of skiers, that's it's also about traditions and culture, I guess.
Yes, it's very traditional, and of course it is indigenous people. We have also history of indigenous, and in Finland, Sami people and other Arctic countries, there are the cultural problem is, I think, the biggest. It's also radio herding at that kind. But if there is no winters, it's a big problem. And to the species, some birds which change colors for the winter, they come white. And this November we have had dark November, no snow, and those white birds, the predators catch them and also hunters. It's not normal and not good for those kind of animals, for example.
Thank you. Ishita, I'm going to move over to you. And as I said in the beginning, in the post-Arctic, particularly in the Alaskan part, we see huge rates of coastal erosion. But it's not only in the very high Arctic we do see that. I know in Denmark we see a lot of coastal erosion there, and you're the research and development manager of Port in Esbjerg. And can you say a bit about like how does climate change affect Denmark also on your part of Fennoscandia and how you adapt to that?
Yes, like my fellow co-speaker mentioned that climate change is all over, and of course we see the impact of climate change with the melting of ice, and how now the focus is how are we going to adapt. And of course the winter has certainly shifted. When I moved to Denmark, say 12 years ago, it was cold weather already starting in end of September, October. We used to get snow, but the shift is so prominent now that we don't get any snow until the end of December. So it's no more White Christmas anymore, and it's only a few traces of snow, not like a huge snowfall. What I hear from the locals that I work with is it's like February or March that's impacting, and of course the fisheries is impacted that way. It's getting a lot less, and a lot of coastal income from Denmark is dependent on fisheries. From where I worked, like in Port of Esbjerg, fisheries used to be the primary source of livelihood at that point of time, but now it's all gone away. And we have to take into consideration, while we are talking about the port development and business development, so we are really focused on how the melting of ice can be beneficial to us. How can we take benefit from it? Of course, talking about the negatives is one side, but this is it here. So what do we do? So as a part of, if I talk about the southern Denmark, where our focus primarily is, the shipping routes are changing, the hubs are changing, because it is observed that in future, with more availability of with the ships are going to reroute themselves. Particularly the island of Bornholm in Denmark is going to be the next shipping hub, because it's going to be in that. And certainly, what can we do ourselves is we can go and adapt to more greener ways of protecting what we have today, so that the future generation is not impacted. So we have a lot of focus on sustainability and green transition as well. But you can hear it on the locals that there is a lot of impact that's coming to them as in personal. It's a very common tradition in Scandinavia to go for a cold water dip on the New Year's Eve, I believe, perhaps in Denmark and Norway. And what I heard from the recent New Year last year, it was that the water is not cold enough at this point of time, and it gets so easy, and they don't have the same charm that used to be there in the previous years. So of course, it's small things that are making, that are contributing to the bigger impact of what's happening in the Arctic, of course. So yeah.
Thank you. It's really impactful stories. Christian, you've been around in both the Arctic and Antarctic, and you see a lot of those things happening also in the more remote areas. Could you add in on this? Could you tell a bit more, like what do you see when it comes to how it affects the Arctic and the people living in the Arctic? And also, I had a pleasure of sitting into your session earlier today. It's really, really impressive and impactful. Could you say a bit like how we can find new ways to increase the global awareness of what's happening in the Arctic when it comes to climate change, and also how it implicates the rest of the globe, like how to make people understand the connection between the Arctic and the rest of the globe?
Thank you very much. So yes, first of all, I think the polar regions are really the front lines of climate change. So this is really the place on Earth where everything happens fastest. Ice is melting up to 3-4 times faster in the Arctic. And global warming is really visible, very visible. Decade after decade, you see it almost year after year, what is happening there. Now, it is an indicator of what is happening worldwide as well. So rising sea levels as the first thing that pops up. When glaciers are melting, this is fresh water supply of our planet. Well, it contributes to the sea level rise. And sea level rise affects the whole world, all coastal areas. More than half of the world's population is living by coastal regions. Also Pacific island states worldwide, all over, are directly affected by this. Coastal erosion, infiltration of salt water, and so on. So it is an indicator. It is also a regulator, so it acts as a barometer of the global climate system. So whatever happens there is really an indication of what is happening worldwide, because the polar regions, they have to keep the Earth also cool. The ice has a function. It's the air conditioning system of our planet. So at the equator, it's the nearest point to the sun. It's warming up. The ocean warms up, of course, and it's I don't know the word anymore now. It creates the circulation, and in the cold it drops down. And circulation is a process that is also affected by the ice melt, for example, of the Greenlandic ice sheet. So this is fresh water coming into salty water, slowing down the Gulf Stream, for example, affecting weather systems and the whole climate in the long run. In North America, in Europe, also in the Middle East. So this is just an example. So we see that the ice also has the albedo effect. So it means that when ice melts, well, water absorbs that heat, the energy from the sun, the light, but also the heat is not being reflected again. And that is really the function also of these polar regions. So also it affects biodiversity, it affects humans, it affects everyone and all over the planet. So we're all really on the same boat, we're all connected, wherever you live on this planet. And we see it already happening. So, and to answer your question about global awareness, well, these are challenging times. Geopolitically, there is a lot going on, a lot of big shifts, different new realities, I would say. And collaboration seems to be sometimes very difficult, although I think we have to bridge socio-economic conflict, we have to bridge different political insights and realities, because it's really a story for human beings as a species, and it's really the future generations that are at stake here, actually. So I think personally that visual communication is also very important, because the reality is also we speak so many languages on this planet. Language is a direct barrier, so you can explain, and another person that doesn't speak English or whatever language might not understand. So what I do is I document, I show the reality and the visual reality as a documentary impact storyteller. And so image doesn't lie, it shows what is going on, it evokes emotions, it gives information as well. So I think that's a very powerful medium. And I think building bridges also between different realities, the industry, policy level, scientific institutions and researchers, they all have their own sphere of reality. So I think it's very essential that all of these realities are also collaborating and understanding each other. So I believe that scientific outreach is a starting point. So I try to do my best in communicating science, not only showing what scientists are doing, for example, in polar regions and on oceans, but also their findings, of course, and methods and instruments and the importance of it. And also what they start to understand. We really underestimated the function and the importance of our ocean for so many decades. Now we start to understand that it's really, the major lung of our world, providing oxygen, absorbing the carbon and so on. So, thank you.
It's really important what you say. I mean, we know from records from this glacier cores from Greenland, for instance, that we have had shifts, temperature changed by 20 degrees in less than 50 years. So we're talking really dramatic shifts. Do you think people are aware to the impacts that this may have?
If they're aware? No, not enough. The majority still on this planet is, I believe, still thinking, this is happening far from us. But the problem is that it's really affecting, everything is connected. This is the reality. So,
thank you. And you're part of the Arctic Mayors Forum, and you also, you're connecting all the Arctic mayors around Pan-Arctic, and do you see, what do you see from your side on when it comes to awareness? Do you think people outside of the Arctic are aware of the impacts the Arctic may have on the rest of the world?
Yes, I think so, that in the Arctic, we are aware, people are aware, but I'm concerned about it, that how we increase the awareness around the world, in every countries and people of those countries and companies and governments in the different countries in the whole globe. And that's why it's very important to how we raise the awareness. We can make regulations, statements, and that kind of things, nice words in conferences and so on. But we need acts, I think so. And it starts from local people, normal people, in their daily life. If they do acts, and if they who elect those parliament members and we are ministers and presidents, if they say that now we have to do something, then it happens something, and we have to raise awareness on normal people. That's why we made, for example, in Salla, we made a campaign. We were pitting Summer Games 2032, but the real thing was climate change. Save Salla campaign, and it spread over 120 countries, reached 7.5 billion people, raise awareness, raise conversation about climate change over 8%. And that kind of, some kind of crazy things can raise awareness. And if we can say the Arctic will be saved, then we can say that the whole globe had saved. And these connections, they are quite difficult to normal people to understand, but if you give good examples and that make people do something good.
And that was the famous statement of your former president, like, if you can save the Arctic, you can save the world.
Yes,
if
yes.
I remember correctly.
Yes, that's.
I think that was one of the most beautiful statements when it comes to addressing the impact in many ways.
Yes.
I would like to continue on that, and maybe we'll start with you, Ishita. So if you're talking about cooperation and regulation, so what kind of international cooperation and multilateral actions are needed to manage and mitigate these changes, from your perspective?
So what I firmly believe, and also I think a lot of us follow, is that it's not the time to compete with each other. So what are we doing? We are doing better, and we have to be the best. It's time to collaborate, and because we have the same focus, we have the same vision. It's time to perhaps learn from each other, have knowledge sharing, gain knowledge from each other's experience, have more of open forums like this where we can learn what one country or one nation is doing or one part is doing, and then of course we can find out how can we mutually work together towards the goal that we are reaching. I think that's really important in going forward. There's no particular, we have the same vision, we have the same, the mission is the same, so why not join hands and see how can we together achieve it, in my opinion. Yeah.
Erkki, from your side, what would you say? How should we, like, what kind of multilateral cooperation and actions do we need?
You mentioned this Arctic Mayors Forum. I think that kind of cooperation, where different people from different municipalities, cities around the Arctic area, and they know what's the problems and what are the challenges, possibilities in this area. When they talk together and do it so that in their own countries happens then some good things. And I think that there is a more and more famous people and people which are youth peoples. They are looking, wow, that's good guy. If that kind of people tells these stories and what is happening, because I think in this seminar it was very very nice to hear that when there are 1,700 people, but there was also 500 youth, and we have to take these youth more and more to these kinds of seminars and discussions and give them possibilities to also act to the statements and what we are doing, because they are the future, and we cannot wait at the time when they are ministers also, or so on. You know what has happened before it. Warming has gone ahead, and take youth. I think that's very important.
Thank you very much, Christian. I'm going to give you the last word on your thoughts about this in 1 minute. Like, how should we collaborate? How should we cooperate? And what action should be taken?
Well, I think on international stage, maybe through a treaty or I don't know what, I think countries should really also raise awareness on the use of, for example, plastics, and on waste management and so on. I notice through my many travels that so many people are really not aware about where it ends up and the cycle of everything, not only cycle of water, but also cycle of waste, how everything ends up in the ocean and then in the fish that they eat eventually. So if you raise awareness on that, you might actually act different. And I think it's also, each one of us has with knowledge you can act. So each one of us has a role in this, and we're all in this together, every human being on this planet. So I think it starts with information as well, to the deepest and the highest level and the widest level possible. So thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent statement, I would say. And I guess to conclude, I guess what we have said today is that the Arctic is not a distant place. It's just right in front of you, and we need to act together, not only people of the Arctic, but people of the world too. This is on a common good.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much.